Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill PR 9, the Edmonton Convention and Tourism Authority Amendment Act 1987. The purpose of this bill is to make certain changes in the Constitution of the Authority.
The Honourable Member for Stony Plain has moved for first reading Bill PR 9, Edmonton Convention and Tourism Authority Amendment Act 1987. Those wishing to give assent to first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill PR 9, being Edmonton Convention and Tourism Authority Amendment Act 1987, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Herron, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to file with the Assembly appropriate copies of the new Canadian Water Quality Guidelines. These guidelines were developed in the past year while Alberta acted as the chairman of the Canadian Council of Resource and Environment Ministers.
Introduction of special guests.
Member for Banff Cochrane.
Mr. Speaker, I have the privilege today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly a gentleman who has served his division south of the Bow River in the municipal district of Rockyview admirably for a number of years, and indeed the entire municipal district of Rockyview as the Reeve of Rockyview. He's sitting in the public gallery. Mr. Bill Coppathor, would he rise and receive the welcome of the Assembly?
Ministerial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll try and put my best foot forward, and in saying that, please no Snickers when you see my sneakers. I'm sure the color is appropriate to some. In cooperation with Fitness Canada and numerous private sector sponsors, Alberta Recreation and Parks actively promotes the celebration of Canada's Fitness Week between May 22nd and 31st, 1987. Canada's Fit Week is a national event which focuses on the value and benefits of physical activity and the development of healthy lifestyles. Each year, thousands of Albertans participate in Fit Week-related events. For example, in the 1986 Elderobic Moonwalk activity, our seniors went for especially long walks, recorded their distances, and combined them to find that, as a group, they had traveled 1.5 times the distance between Edmonton and the moon. And this year, Mr. Speaker, they intend to go to the distance to the moon and make it all the way back. We wish them well. Our youth are involved in innovative projects offered through schools and community organizations. Adults have a wide variety of opportunities to be actively involved in Fit Week activities. And families are also encouraged to get moving and come alive during Canada's Fit Week. Canada's Fit Week, or National Physical Activity Week, as it was called before this year, has involved as many as 620,000 Albertans. In 1987, Canada's Fit Week will begin with the declaration of Friday, May 22nd, as Sneaker Day. More than 365,000 Albertans will lace up their favorite sneakers tomorrow and wear them around the house, around town, at school, and hopefully to work. Mr. Speaker, it is my sincere hope that you and all my associates in this Assembly will be among those that jump into Canada's Fit Week with both feet. To facilitate this request, I received from the Honourable Otto Jelinek, Minister for Fitness and Amateur Sport at the federal level, 2 pairs of sneakers which I'm pleased to present to you and to our Premier, the Honourable Don Getty. I've also taken the liberty, Mr. Speaker, to provide a pair for the Honourable Leader of the Opposition as well. To the members from all constituencies and from both sides of the House, I extend an invitation and a challenge to help kick off Canada's Fit Week by being a part of Sneaker Day and dressing their feet appropriately. I also challenge them to participate throughout the week by doing the following. I would first suggest that on Monday, May 25th, that they review their eating habits and do their bodies a favor by passing up on dessert, and I promise to do the same. On Tuesday, May 26th, use the stairs instead of the elevator. On Wednesday, May 27th, meet me on the front steps of the Legislature building at 12:30 p.m. We will then join in the 15-minute public exercise session being held on the grounds. And later that day, phone their local participation challenge number to register their involvement as part of the challenge between Alberta's communities. And on Thursday, May 28th, Mr. Speaker, schedule a 15-minute stroll around the Legislature grounds for their afternoon fresh air break. If they'd like some company during their walk, they may give me a call and we'll try and coordinate our schedules. And fifth, on Friday, May 29th, take part in a fun physical activity with their families, and we'd encourage them to do so. And to assist the members in supporting other initiatives within their constituencies, I'm providing a list of all registered events in Alberta. Specific events have been highlighted for their respective members' attention. As they accept this challenge, Mr. Speaker, and lend their support to Fit Week activities in their own communities, they'll be sharing in a greater effort to promote healthier, more active, and satisfying lifestyles for the people of Alberta. I urge all members and all Albertans to join in the celebration of Canada's Fit Week. And, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that the pages deliver these lovely, lovely sneakers and would file with the Assembly the appropriate material for the same.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister for the nice Pantone 249 fuchsia shoes. And I really appreciate that the Tories are coming to appreciate that color so much. But I also say it's, Mr. Speaker, it's quite appropriate that the Fitness Week is coming up, because I understand the member from Vegreville took a fitness appraisal test a couple days ago. Fortunately, found out he was dead. Now, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the challenges, they look very interesting. I perhaps could challenge the Honourable Minister to a squash game, but I assure you I will not be challenging the Premier to a golf game. But let me just conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying, of course, it is a very serious matter, fitness, and I'm sure if that we all took the suggestions of the Honourable Minister, we might even save the Honourable Minister of Hospitals and Medicare some money, and I think we can all look forward to that. Thank you.
The Chair will now rule itself out of order for the matter of exhibits under 333 of Beauchesne.
Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, back to the Minister of Hospitals and Medicare. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health has indicated that he plans to spend $270,000 to influence public opinion on the health care issue. My question to the Minister, will the Minister explain why the $70,000 letter to Albertans and the $200,000 TV coverage does not relate to health promotion, but rather to promotion of the government's image as a provider of health care?
First of all, Mr. Speaker, the two matters are quite separate. We embarked upon a television advertising and brochure campaign some weeks ago that would provide information to Albertans about the cost of the health care system and make suggestions to them about healthy lifestyles that might reduce our medical care costs. Honourable members, most honourable members would be aware that in other parts of the world where health care is not paid 100% by government, there is a great deal of advertising being done by healthcare insurance companies, private companies, and others, and it's been determined that it's extremely effective to talk to our citizens by way of the medium of television and other advertisings about these matters. So we thought that it may be useful in Alberta to try that, and $200,000 from a $900 million health care plan is a very, very small amount of money. We could spend $9 million and only be at 1%. What we're doing with that $200,000 program is trying to find out if indeed in this province that's an effective way to go in order to encourage a healthy lifestyle, to make people aware of the costs of the medical care system so that we can preserve that for the future. Now, the other dollar amount the honourable member mentioned is quite a different matter. It is the practice when we make major changes to the health care insurance plan to communicate that to Albertans. We have a responsibility to do that. Last summer and at the end of July, we reached an agreement with the Alberta Medical Association to end extra billing. At that time, I sent a letter to all Albertans who held a health care insurance number advising them of the changes that were underway there, and we've done the same thing now. That's a matter of routine, and it will continue.
Mr. Speaker, be a little more specific about the television advertising. One particularly, and I would say suggest insulting television advertisement, shows a series of pieces of medical equipment passing over an electronic scanner. Then the advertisement includes with the message, rising health care costs is an issue. And my question to this minister, does this minister really believe that this condescending form of advertising, trying to make sick Albertans feel guilty, is a justifiable expense at this particular time?
Oh, really?
Mr. Speaker, I did not design the advertising. I seen it and approved of it before it went out. There was a competition amongst, I believe it was 5 major advertising companies from the private sector in this province who presented different ways that they believed we could get the message across. The one that was chosen after very careful consideration by people who are extremely knowledgeable, both my Director of Public Affairs and individuals in our Bureau of Public Affairs. And we believe that it's an appropriate advertising message that has been provided to us by that advertising agency. As I said yesterday in relation to some answers in the question period, the monitoring of the results of that advertising is going to be a very important part of the costs we are paying to the advertising agency. And I am hopeful that the end result, Mr. Speaker, will be that we do find that it's very effective to communicate with Albertans in that way. And if that is the case, then we would be looking at spending some considerable sums of money at doing just that.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I think if people watch that advertising, it's not appropriate at all, but I'll move over to the Deputy Premier, who I understand is now also the Minister of Propaganda. Mr. Speaker, the last few years have seen a truly alarming rate on the amount spent by government on paid advertising in various Alberta news media. According to the answer to question 184 tabled, direct advertising has jumped to $16.4 million last year, up from $14.5 million the previous year and $10.6 million the year before. Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that the government advertising has reached a level of $45,000 per day, every day, including Sundays and statutory holidays, has the minister decided to curb the appetite of ministers to sell themselves and their policies by taxpayers' money?
Well, I'm going to take some time to answer that question, Mr. Speaker, because it's important. However, I'm amazed at the source. You should see the propaganda that's dropped off at my door at regular intervals by the member from Edmonton Centre. Under the guise of, and paid for by MLA Communications Allowance. Yeah. I mean, very interesting reading. So talk about the pot calling the kettle black.
Right. Shame.
The truth hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The advertising budgets for the various departments are considered by Treasury Board at the time that the various ministers come before the Treasury Board when the Treasurer is finalizing his budget. And very often there's a special program of one kind or another. The one that comes to my mind is the 3-year program by ADAC, which will be given substantial extra funding. A more recent one was our thrust into tourism following the formation of a new Department of Tourism. And following modern merchandising techniques, we're like any other supplier that has a good service or product to sell. You're not going to sell it, Mr. Speaker, if you keep your light hidden under a bushel. And so we want to tell the world about what we've got here. There are a variety of other information programs which I expect in this complex age that our citizens expect to receive, such as health care premium rates, subsidy programs that are available, highway closings because of construction, job opportunities that are available, contracts that are being awarded and are being tendered. There's any number of public information programs. Again, the Department of Lands and Forests budget will, for advertising, will expand during the forest fire season or during the hunting season. So there are all kinds of reasons, Mr. Speaker, why government has to advertise.
Have you noticed that the worse they get in governing, the more they spend in advertising? And like the Premier says, spend, 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 Mr. Speaker. But I noticed we're even outdoing ourselves. In March of 1987, we broke the record because we had to sell the hopeless budget that the Treasurer brought down. The bill for that 1 month alone was more than $2.1 million. Now, in view, Mr. Speaker, of the $270,000 advertising campaign announced by the Ministers of Hospitals and Medicare, will this minister advise us how much the government plans to spend on paid advertising this year? Is it going to be $20 million this year as we govern even worse?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I can easily get it by canvassing the departments, and I will get their advertising budgets. It's included in the budget document that every member has, but I'll put it together for you if you're unable to do it yourself. One correction, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Treasurer's budget. The MLAs in the government used their communications allowance and pooled that and chose to do it that way, so it was not a government expenditure. The opposition members or the members of the other parties, of course, have ways of doing it in a similar fashion if they want to. But the majority of those funds were the pooled MLA communications allowances.
Supplementary, West.
For goodness sakes, you've got to learn to read these statements if you're going to be in the legislature.
Westlock Sturgeon, succinct supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to get back to the original question, although I do recognize that ancient free enterprise principle that the government is using, that the poorer the product, the more advertising you have to do. But I would like to ask the Minister of Health and Welfare whether the budget or the expenditures that he is using to advertise this program is coming out of the Premier's budget or out of the lottery's funds or out of the funds set aside for health care of Albertans. And also, who is the lucky Tory that got the contract?
Westlock Sturgeon.
You can't read either.
Perhaps first I would invite the honourable member to extend an apology to the advertising firm because they are not a lucky Tory that got a contract. And the member may wish to deal with that at a later date. I would be pleased to provide him with the name. I would be pleased to provide him with the name of the company that got the contract, the individuals involved, and the other advertising agencies that were involved in the competition. I think, Mr. Speaker, it's a pretty sad day when the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party has to make those sorts of remarks about advertising companies that are extremely good companies working in our province. I'll leave it at that.
Here's member for Little Bow.
A supplementary question to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate the period of time that these advertisements will take place? Is it going to be for a year's period? What amount of advertising are we getting for this $270,000?
Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, as I explained earlier, we're dealing with two separate issues. This message here which is a letter to all Albertans. On the back side of it is a fact sheet. Deals with changes made to the health care insurance plan effective August 1st, which I announced on Tuesday. If we have other changes at premium rates, premium subsidies, or whatever throughout the course of the year, we will do the same thing. The advertising dollars for this are in the budget of the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care, and they're put there for the purpose of communicating. That's important, and that will continue. The other issue is one of whether or not we can, through the medium of television and other mass media advertising, change attitudes, inform people, get our citizens more involved in the whole issue of health care. And so what we did was put together an 8-week program. It's running for 8 full weeks, after which there will be an assessment of the value of that kind of advertising. And, Mr. Speaker, the question is important because then we will have an opportunity throughout the course of the summer to review that whole program and the assessment we have from it and decide whether or not we can go into a major program. What we've got now is a very small experimental program when you talk about $1 billion worth of health care services, and that's being done as well from the budget of the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care.
Supplementary, Banff Cochrane. Final supplementary on this issue.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care, and particularly in view of the earlier comments by the Minister of Recreation and Parks, does the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care have an estimate of the savings to all Albertans, which will result if Albertans can indeed be encouraged to live a healthier lifestyle and reduce their visits to physicians and to hospitals?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's very difficult to ever get an estimate on it, but I would suggest to the honourable members that the advertising work that's being done by ADAC and other similar organizations across Canada, plus the federal government's participation program and others of that nature over the last several years have shown us that there is indeed great value to be obtained from that kind of medium advertising. And I expect that we will see, in terms of health care in this problem, a major advertising program developed within the course of the next year. It will be done on the basis of us knowing that, in fact, that will be cost-effective and lead to healthier lifestyles and improvement in health for all Albertans.
To direct the second question to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Mr. Speaker, on Friday last week, the Minister defended the discriminatory practices of the automobile insurance companies by attempting to convince average Albertans over 25 that they are benefiting from this type of discrimination to young males. Now, Mr. Speaker, if that was the case, then clearly Alberta's automobile insurance rates for those groups would be much lower than other Western provinces, and clearly they are not, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister now admit the truth of this matter, that all Albertans, in fact, pay too much for their insurance in this province?
No, Mr. Speaker, I certainly will not. The opposition leader continues to refer to other Western provinces, all of which have government-owned insurance corporations. That form of insurance, that is to say government insurance, is not comparable to the private insurance arrangements. For example, in 1982, Saskatchewan government insurance received a $72 million subsidy, which no doubt had some impact on the premiums that were charged to the Saskatchewan residents.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that wasn't the question. The question was the rates. The Minister said the rates were cheaper, and we've looked at it. It doesn't matter whether you're over 25 or under, business or pleasure, male or female, Alberta's auto insurance rates are much higher than the other Western provinces. And since I put my information forward, and the Minister made that statement on Friday, will she table the information on which she bases her defense of the insurance companies?
Mr. Speaker, that question is a good one for the order paper, and I look forward to seeing it on that order paper. But I must say that the leader is continuing to make allegations about Alberta's premiums and what would happen if the adjustments that he's suggesting were made, and then attempting to prove his case by referring to a premium set in another province which is based on an entirely different scheme. I would challenge him to make the logic of his argument far clearer.
I don't need to make the logic of mine. The people of Alberta, the people of Alberta know what they're paying, and they're the ones on the phone to us. They're the ones that want to know the logic. And I might point out that Manitoba's Auto Pact has made profits in almost every year at the same time. My question is, because the minister likes to stand up and make statements off the top of her head, I want to know, do they really do any monitoring to determine what are fair rates and if Albertans are being treated fairly by insurance companies? Are they checking this?
Well, again, the Leader of the Opposition seems not to be listening. We have an Automobile Insurance Board. Let me say it very slowly. An Automobile Insurance Board in Alberta. And that board reviews every premium charged by the automobile insurance companies in Alberta for the mandatory portion of automobile coverage. There is no premium charged without their approval. And yes, of course, we are monitoring both the reasonableness and the fairness and the actuarial basis for those premiums. But I'm pleased to hear the Leader of the Opposition refer to the Manitoba Public Insurance Corporation insofar as he seems to think that he has all of the facts on that. It was earlier this year, in March, reported that they had had $24 million of losses. $24 million of losses, furthermore, that were not reported to the public.
Well,
Sterling Lyon has a different
Mr. Speaker, all I say is check the rates, check the profits made, check the profits made year after year,
right.
and we'll debate this one right across the next provincial election, Mr. Speaker. But the question I have to make, she says they check it. It's like the proverbial fox looking after the chickens. There's no doubt about that. But for those of us that aren't as naive and trusting as the Honourable Minister, will she at least agree to an independent review of the auto insurance coverage and rating practices in Alberta so that public policy may at least be based on the facts?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition seems to wish to criticize 3 or 4 independent members of the Auto Insurance Board who are put there for the very purpose that he is discussing. We do not do this just once in a while either. Every time an insurance company wishes to change its premiums, they must get approval from that board, and indeed they do.
Westlock Sturgeon, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister on insurance. In view of the fact that even the most impartial survey of rates across Canada indicates something is wrong in Alberta because the rates are so high, and also in view of the fact that there's an investigation on in Ontario and Quebec now on the over-buildup of reserves by insurance companies. In other words, it's charging too much to build up large reserves. Has the board or the minister satisfied themselves that the charges here in Alberta, because of a pussycat management, are not so high that what they're doing is building reserves in North America at the expense of the Alberta citizen with high rates?
Well, I again would challenge this particular member, the honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon, to compare the rates across Canada, and particularly I would ask that he compare our rates in automobile insurance to those in Ontario. I think if he took the care to make that comparison, he would discover that our rates are generally only 1/2 of what they are in Ontario.
Member for Little Bow.
Your supplementary question to the Minister. In terms of the responsibility of the Insurance Review Board, do they assure the government that none of the funds raised by an insurance company in Alberta, such as Wawanesa that has its headquarters in Winnipeg, take funds from Alberta to supplement their payments in Manitoba or other places in Canada where they now exist? Is that check being done by the Insurance Board? Could the Minister assure us of that?
Mr. Speaker, it is my understanding that the rates that are charged in Alberta are set on the basis of various criteria, one of which is the loss claim experience in Alberta, one of which is the region in which the car is generally being driven. And they are all checked out on an actuarial basis, and so they are indeed made in Alberta rates.
Lethbridge West.
Supplementary, Honourable Minister. In view of the fact there appears to be many interested groups in Alberta representing both the insurance industry and the consumers, could the Minister advise the Assembly if the Honourable Minister has had any serious number of requests to review the insurance system in the province of Alberta?
I can advise the honourable member that I have not, considering there are almost 2.5 million Albertans, I would say the number of requests is minimal.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier today. We're all aware, Mr. Speaker, that constitutional amendments flowing from the Meech Lake Agreement will be subject to the approval of the legislature. Quebec's National Assembly has established a committee of MNAs to examine the Meech Lake Agreement in detail. I'm sitting right now. In fact, they're sitting right now. To the Premier, given the great importance of the Meech Lake provisions for the future of Canada and Alberta, is the Premier willing to establish an all-party committee of the Legislative Assembly to examine the Meech Lake Agreement today?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, so much for open government, but how does the Premier expect the members of this House then to blindly approve the Meech Lake Accord without hearing at least some expert testimony with respect to the meaning of the concepts such as, quote, distinct society, end of quote?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Meech Lake Accord will come before our House for debate, and it'll be depend there on all the members who represent all the people of Alberta to express their views and see whether the House approves of it.
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of more people than just the MLAs are interested, but furthermore, is the Premier then, will he make a copy of the proposed amendments, or when will a copy of the proposed amendments be released to this legislature? When will this happen?
As soon as they can, Mr. Speaker.
I'm just wondering who's taping them today, but Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, can he indicate when the First Ministers will next be meeting to approve in principle the Meech Lake Agreement, and can he give some indication of the proposed timetable then for the passing of these constitutional amendments?
Mr. Speaker, there is work going on right now with officials of the Government of Alberta and officials of all governments in Canada to put the original Meech Lake Agreement into constitutional text. It is hoped that at a meeting on June the 2nd, that the premiers will find that wording follows through on the principles which they agreed on, and that they would then sign the agreement at that time. However, they would still have to come to legislatures and be passed.
Member for Little Bow, followed by the member for Banff-Cochrane.
Mr. Speaker, my questions are to the Premier as well. The federal government has promised us a diversification program to enhance not only Alberta's economy but other provinces. Could the Premier indicate what's the status of that diversification program at the present time, and is someone from Alberta giving specific concentration to having that program developed?
Mr. Speaker, the matter is being coordinated through the Department of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs, but it has the concerted assistance and attention of various departments of the government, and that material and information and consultation is going back and forth on a regular basis with the federal government.
Mr. Speaker, at the Premier's conference in Humboldt, Saskatchewan, May 27th to the 28th, will that be a matter on the agenda, and one for the Western Premiers to put forward their point of view?
Mr. Speaker, I'm quite sure that the matter will be discussed in some detail there, and while individual provinces may have particular points of view and lead the discussion in certain areas, it's quite possible that we will have a joint position that we can make as well. Now, I can't prejudge that because each government has different views of matters. However, if we do come to a general agreement, then we would be contained in a communique.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Premier, The federal government is supposedly developing a program called Industrial Horizons. Is the Premier aware of that? And is there some involvement of the Alberta government?
I've heard of it, Mr. Speaker. I have not got details of it at my fingertips.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary to the Premier, in view of the fact that the Industrial Horizons is, as it says, encourages manufacturing. We in Alberta are in a landlocked economy far from markets, consequently at a disadvantage at any time in the industrial area. Has he talked or has he got the support of other premiers in approaching the federal government that we would have money in lieu of an industrial program to develop programs that are more indigenous to Alberta, such as the brain industries, if you want to call it that?
Mr. Speaker, I haven't directly, but I'd say that I don't agree at all with the lead-in to his questions. Alberta has lots of strength and lots of opportunities, and we are not taking the negative attitude the member for Westlock Sturgeon has taken, but rather we are going to build, we are not going to beg.
Edmonton Norwood, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in terms of the strategic plan that the federal government has talked about, I understand it was supposed to be out in March and now June, and now we understand haven't even got the letter out off the minister's desk. Has the Premier got any up-to-date information about when this plan might be announced?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition shouldn't take his information from leaked documents. We all know, Mr. Speaker, that there are some of those. I was thinking perhaps on our order paper we should start to put under returns and filings leaked documents by NDP. It's so nice to watch when certain ones stand and you know they've got that document there and they try and throw the trick question at you and then say, and now I will file this leaked document. Mr. Speaker, I've been discussing the matter with the federal government, and they are progressing as quickly as possible. For me, the important thing is that it is a good Western economic diversification plan, not that it comes out by a certain date.
Member for Banff Cochrane, followed by the member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Provincial Treasurer. Yesterday, the Provincial Treasurer announced the 5% hotel room tax, scheduled to commence on June 1, will not be payable on rooms booked in Alberta before March 21, 1987, and used before November 1, 1987. Last night, Mr. Speaker, in Banff, I met with a large number of constituents, and I had the pleasure of advising them of this announcement. Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer, what system is the Treasurer established for the accommodation industry to follow to ensure the collection and remission to the province of the 5% tax on hotel rooms?
Mr. Speaker, as I said in my announcement, which was put forward by my colleague, the Minister of Tourism, and myself, I did appreciate the advice and assistance which I received from members of the government caucus, in particular the assistance of the member from Banff Cochrane in representing his constituents was outstanding. He did bring a lot of pressure. Mr. Speaker, and I think this is a reasonable response. When we bring in a new fiscal plan, such as a new set of taxation, it does have some impact on a particular sector. And we have shown here, Mr. Speaker, that we are responsive to the requests for adjustments, and we have made those corrections. I think that because of the date of the budget and the fact that there were some considerable bookings in place before the date of the budget, that in fact we had to deal with the fact that that tax could not be collected and was not intended that the tax be paid by the people in the industry itself. But specifically, Mr. Speaker, we will put in place a system which will allow the Department of Treasury to collect this tax. It's not a big administrative problem for the tourism sector. I think with the sophisticated systems that are now in place, they can simply calculate the number of days that the individual stayed and applied the 5% tax to the room rate. A very simple calculation will be obviously audited by our department, but I don't think will cause any undue administrative pressures to the sector itself.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Treasurer, will exceptions be permitted for less than the 30-day stay, for example, to the Treasurer, for colleges, universities, and such as the Banff Centre? Will there be exceptions in this situation?
Again, Mr. Speaker, if we find that advanced educational institutions are competing with the private sector and providing rooms in a similar sense that anyone in the hotel business does provide rooms, then they will be subject to taxation as well.
Treasurer, second supplementary. Will there be a fee paid by the province to the operators and penalties assessed for failure to comply with the requirement?
There will be no fee for administration, Mr. Speaker, because we don't think it's a big problem. However, because it will not, if there should be a case of non-compliance, obviously we would adjudicate that on the basis of whether or not it was error or whether it was outright misrepresentation. In the latter case, I would expect that there would be some sort of penalty, as there is with any failure to pay other kinds of tax.
Speaker, my final supplementary. Has the Treasurer developed a form of application? Will it be on a 4-month, third of the year approach for the industry to follow?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, documentation is now being completed, and before, obviously, June the 1st, we will have that documentation available and ready for all the people in the tourism industry.
Member for Vegreville.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer in terms of taking a second look at the effect of some of these punitive taxes announced in the budget. Will he, in the same gracious way, take a close look at the effects of the 5% increase in, or the 5 cent a litre increase in gas for grain farmers?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't catch the last word before they started thumping and yelling across the way. I didn't catch the last word.
I'm talking about the 5 cent a litre increase in fuel used by farmers in the province after June the 1st.
Mr. Speaker, of course, it's clear that there is no increase in farm fuel tax for farmers. It's quite clear that the tax does not apply to, the fuel tax does not apply to farmers, Mr. Speaker, and does not apply to off-road vehicles. That's quite clearly stated, and I would not want, and I know the member from Vegreville would not want, to leave any misleading impression in the minds of this House.
Member for Calgary Buffalo, supplementary.
Along the same lines to the minister, would he also reconsider the 5 cent per litre tax on school boards and municipalities, which are merely passing on the problem from one level of government to another?
Mr. Speaker, they have an opportunity, if it's off-road vehicle, to escape the 5 cent a litre tax, similar to any off-road vehicle, Mr. Speaker, and that's the way in which the policy has been outlined. And I'm sure that when we complete the debate of the appropriation bill and have an opportunity to debate the bill on taxation, we'll hear more stories about the way in which this tax will impact. And I welcome that debate because we'll be considering the ways in which taxation will be applied in subsequent years, and it's interesting to hear the views from across the way.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona, followed by the member for Edmonton Highlands, if there's time, and then Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, my question concerns leaked gas rather than leaked memos, and is directed to the Minister of the Environment, and concerns the gas leak that occurred in Calgary on the 29th of March 1987. Shortly after that, the Minister said that he would not tell any judge what to do, but hoped that the offender would be harshly dealt with. I paraphrase his actual words, but that was the purport of it. Is it still the Minister's wish that charges be laid?
Talk about your...
Mr. Speaker, it remains the Minister's wish that the culprit be identified and charges be filed against that particular culprit.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary to the Attorney General. When will the Attorney General fulfill the Minister's wish?
Well, there's an old saying about wishes, but I won't repeat it here. I don't think it's really a matter of fulfilling a wish when it comes to the question of prosecutions. It is necessary to have evidence which is sufficient to warrant the laying of an information. That is not yet available to the Department of the Attorney General. Until such time as it is, it's not possible to really proceed with the laying of charges. I should say that, however, it may, in fact, be now in the hands of agents of the Attorney General. I should say it is not now available. It may be, since the Department of the Environment just late last week supplied some additional information to officials of the Attorney General's Department on which consideration and examination is underway.
Mr. Speaker, the record published by the Department of the Environment as to prosecutions under the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act shows that in the 13 years 1972 to 1984, out of 42 prosecutions under the Clean Air Act, 26 were successful. Under the Clean Water Act, of 24 prosecutions, 9 were successful. Will the Attorney General agree that this record is what has given him pause in laying charges at all in this matter, given the considerable lapse of time since the 29th of March?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for Strathcona has, of course, asked for me to, in part, account for matters that were took place before I assumed the responsibility as Attorney General. That is not a consideration in this particular set of circumstances. The items under consideration are whether or not there is sufficient evidence and whether or not certain regulations and so on have been in fact complied with, and that's under review. And as I had indicated elsewhere on this subject, the matter has been made more difficult by reason of the public speculation in terms of gathering the necessary evidence. And it is, however, as I understand it, now, the Department is now in possession of all relevant information, and therefore we should be able to make an announcement by the beginning of next week as to whether or not there is sufficient evidence for charges to be laid in this case.
Final supplementary to the Attorney General, Mr. Speaker. Given that record and given the obvious difficulty in coming to grips with the problem of regulating polluters, when may we expect the Attorney General to bring forward, on behalf of the government, revisions to the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts and the regulations thereunder, which will make them both more effective and easier of enforcement?
Well, I don't think that would be the case unless responsibilities are shifted. I believe the responsibility for that legislation rests with the Minister of the Environment, not the Attorney General. So it would be up to the government, but through the Minister of the Environment, to recommend any changes. And as I indicated in my earlier answer, it's not really a question of the record of successful prosecutions that is at issue in this case. It's whether or not the facts are there to proceed or not.
Westlock Sturgeon supplementary.
To the Attorney General, too, in view of the time delays in litigation and the problems in settling these cases, when will the government or when will the department establish an unsatisfied judgment fund similar to those of automobile accidents, whereby those injured or harmed by environmental disasters could get their pay early, and then the litigation could go on at the time after that to be settled eventually by the government?
The government hasn't had such a unique idea under consideration, but it will be noted.
This is not back and forth. Thanks very much. Edmonton Highlands, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar, if there's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to direct my question today to the Minister of Culture. It seems that after some 14 years of working just fine the way it was, the Minister has suddenly decided, prior to even second reading of his own bill, let alone passing, that he's going to start gerrymandering around with the board that governs the Foundation of Historical Resources. And I'd like to ask the Minister today why it is that he's made this decision to start doing it now prior to legislative approval for the changes he's recommending in his own government bill.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member would have to be more clear. I don't know to what she's referring.
Well, let me make it clear to the author of the bill. The bill changes the formation of the board so that they're all appointed members instead of having some of them elected, which, as I say, worked just fine for 14 years. Will the minister explain to the Assembly why it is that he's filling vacancies on the board with appointees, now political appointees, instead of allowing them to continue?
Honourable member, the bill referred to is which number? And it's on the order paper. We're in anticipation, debate on a bill. The question's out of order.
Of order, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking about the procedure. You know, my question to the minister then is: will he at least admit that this preemptive changing of the structure of the board amounts to a political gag order on the board? Will he admit to that?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should probably use some of the research funds to investigate journal stories. In fact, there are no changes to the current composition of the board that aren't within the parameters of the current Act, not the changed Act. In fact, if one looks at the Act itself and the move to have those chosen in another way appointed, those current people who are elected will stand there for 2 years. There's been no change to those people or those positions on the board. The only positions appointed in recent times have been those allowed to have been appointed for 14 years, as the honourable member indicates.
Well, the problem, Mr. Speaker, is that there's a public perception that serious patronage is now occurring within this very, very important board. Will the minister agree to suspend, at least for now, until the passage of his bill, the most recent appointment, one of his political buddies from Calgary, one of his campaign workers, until the committee itself, the board itself, has had time to discuss the contents of the bill? Will he do that?
Mr. Speaker, the appointment of the chairman of the board of the Historical Resources Foundation, a competent individual with management skills and an interest in the historical resource area, has nothing whatever to do with the bill, and in fact was appointed to the position before the bill was introduced in the legislature.
Before it was written, Mr. Speaker? My final supplementary question then to the... Yeah, well, I know the minister drafts these things a few months in advance. Final supplementary to the minister then, will he agree that prior to bringing this bill forward for second or third reading, that his board, the current structure of the board, will have opportunity to debate the merits and the impact it will have on their ability to function? Will he commit himself to that?
Mr. Speaker, I could repeat for the honourable member, if the changes in the bill are accepted by this Assembly, the current composition of the board as it relates to those elected members will stand until the term of office of those members is over. So the bill, in fact, will have absolutely no effect on the current operating of the board. But however, the board is welcome to debate whatever it likes to at its next meeting.
Member for Goldbar, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, yes, it's a supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the minister, what about those 2,000 members? What about the members who are the necessary volunteers, who provide many important services and functions? How are they planned to be represented?
Mr. Speaker, the member asked an important question with respect to members of the Historical Resources Foundation who have indeed contributed a great deal to the history and the preservation of it in Alberta. Their relationship to the board will remain unchanged. In fact, I hope that it will be enhanced by further possibilities in terms of their involvement with the historical resources of the province and their involvement as members in support of a foundation.
Time for question period has expired. Mike, do we have unanimous consent to complete this series of supplementaries, if indeed there are any more? Opposed? Additional supplementaries? Orders of the day, might we revert